At the start of this week's parasha, Parashat Acharei Mot, we return very quickly to the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, Acharei Mot, Shenei Bnei Aharon, and then immediately it switches over to the avodah of the Kohanim, or the Kohen Gadol in the Beit HaMikdash, what he has to wear, what he doesn't have to wear, what he has to do for the Yom Kippur service, and then a lot of the commentaries, the Midrashim, are going to connect the het of Nadav and Avihu to the halachot that are going to come about, whether it's regarding the clothing, whether it's regarding the avodah in the Yom Kippur, and trying to explain what was that sin of Nadav Avihu. Okay, says the Midrash. This is Midrash Rabbah by us. This is in Perek Kaf Siman Tet. Says the Midrash. Rabbi Mani Dishab, Rabbi Yeshua Disichnin, Rabbi Yohanan B'Shem Rabbi Levi Amru. These rabbis said, Bishvil Arba'a Devarim Metu Bnei Aharon. They're going to give us 4 reasons why the Bnei Aharon died, why Nadav Avihu died. Ubekulan Ketiv Bahen Mita. And in all these cases, we see from the halakha that if you break it, there is mita. So the first one they bring, that's what I actually want to focus in this Dvar Torah, does not relate to the clothing or to the Yom Kippur service. Rather, it relates to halakha that we learned back in Parashat Shemini. So really, this Dvar Torah goes back in Parashat Shemini, but they're bringing it here because a lot of the other reasons come from our parasha. So what's the first thing they did wrong according to these rabbis? Al shehayu Shetuyee Yayin. Because they had drunk wine, or they were drunk on wine. And we learned there's a halakha of mita. This halakha is written right after their sin. Shneimar, Yayin v'shechar al tesh, that a kohen is not allowed to drink wine or alcoholic beverages when he goes into the Beit HaMikdash. And then it goes on to speak about the other issues, begadim, which me'il, they didn't wash their hands. It goes to give a bunch of other reasons for what the mess up was. But this opinion is Shetuyee Yayin. Rashi brought this opinion back by Parshat Shemini as well. So the question is, why? What is it all about? Why were they drunk? What does it mean they were Shetuyee Yayin? They were drinking alcohol when they went in? Like, what is this all about? So we have mentioned in the past some deep Kabbalistic ideas that yes, they actually were drinking wine. They were trying to fix all the tikkunim. We know that on the Chanukhat Mizbeach day, on this inauguration day of the Mishkan, there was all the tikkunim for all the other sins that had taken place. And but the only sin that seemed to have not been fixed was the sin of the Etz Hadat, which we said, according to many opinions, especially the Kabbalah, is the opinion of wine. So maybe this is the idea of why they were drinking wine, similar to why Noach drank wine once the world was recreated. They wanted to try to make some kind of a tikkun for the chet of Adam Rishon. So we spoke about that in the past. We spoke about in the past, this is not the first time that they ate and drank when trying to look at Hashem, that earlier on when Moshe Rabbeinu had went up to get the Torah, they and the Skinim had gone up, and it says that they looked a little bit too far and they ate and drank. So you have this kind of concept, maybe they're trying to make some kind of a seudat mitzvah as they were trying to go in. But I want to go now with a different approach, taking the idea of Shetuyee Yayin a little bit more metaphoric. I saw this in a sefer called Vayoel Moshe. This is not the Yoel Moshe of Satmar, but rather it's a Yoel Moshe Pinto. This is the son of Rabbi Yeshayahu Pinto, and this is in his sefer on the parasha. So he writes, what does it mean Shetuyee Yayin? So he says, what do we know about Yayin? So this now connects a lot to the Divrei Torah we said just these last couple of weeks over Pesach time, that Yayin is a hint to the secrets. And Nichnas Yayin Yotze Sod, when the wine comes in, the Sod comes out, Gematria 70. We spoke about the Shivim Panim LaTorah and the Shla Kadosh, that the wine symbolizes all the Sodot and the depths and all the facets of how to learn the Torah. So says this Rav Yoel Moshe Pinto, similar to what we said from the Shla Kadosh. He actually quotes a lot of the Shla Kadosh over here as well. He writes that we know that Moshe Rabbeinu himself had originally, according to this approach, had reached the 50th gate of Bina. But then he had to lose it. And we mentioned, why did he lose it? It was the chet ego that made him lose it. But based on the Gemara taught us that how do we know that Moshe Rabbeinu lost it? He lost it because the Pasuk says, "Vatechaserehu me'at me'elohim," that a little bit of the godliness was taken away. And that's the hint that he had lost. He was lacking a little bit of the Shar Nun. He was lacking that last gate. Vatechaserehu me'at, and we brought down, if I'm not mistaken, from the Megillah Mukot, that we had brought down that in the Teilim, the ayin, I guess on the klaf, is a little bit not on the same line as the other words of me'at, mem ayin tet. The ayin is a little bit lower to teach you that the ayin, the shivim panim Torah, the sodot, that was taken a little bit away from him. And we had mentioned from the Shla Kadosh that the 50th gate is actually the 21 faces of the Shem Eheyeh that takes us to the 70. So the 70 symbolizes the sodot, symbolizes the secret. And he says Moshe Rabbeinu originally had reached that level, and says this is beautiful. Yeah, it says this Vayoel Moshe that when Moshe went up to get the Torah, so the Pasuk says, Moshe ala ela Elohim. And Moshe went up to God, but he went up to Elohim. So he says, when he went up to Elohim, that's a hint that he made it all the way up. It's only going to be after the chet of the ego, when Hashem says, Lech red, bring yourself down. You have to lower yourself one level. So when Hashem says, Lech red, he left the level of Elohim, and that's why it's V'tachasero me'at me Elohim. But then, as we mentioned in the past, from the Shvilei Pinchas, at the end of his life, we know Moshe Rabbeinu was in the Avot Moav. Moav is Gematria have 49, and he went to Har Nevo, Har Nun Bo. He went and he got back to that level of the Nun. But here, says this Rav Pinto, he actually has a little bit more to it, because what do we know about the end of Moshe Rabbeinu's life? It starts off, last parasha of the Torah, Vezota beracha asher berach Moshe Isha Elohim. At the end of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, he's known as the Isha Elohim, meaning the Ma'at Elohim, the little bit of godliness that he had lost. Now he's an Isha Elohim. Now he has made it back to that level. He gets back to that level of 70. And another beautiful remez that he gets to this final 50th gate. He gets to the 50, which becomes the 70. Or another beautiful remez, he says, at the end of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, it says that Lo chahata eno, that his eyes, they never got dim. One of the things the Yitro told him earlier on was you have to make yourself a court system. You need shoftim, because if you don't have helpers, your eyes are going to go dim. You're going to become weak and become halash. You can't do it on your own. But the Torah tells us at the very end of his life, no, Moshe Rabbeinu died at 120, totally strong. Lo chahata eno, his eyes didn't become dim, but he says, no. It says the Kol Nishla Kadosh, read eno as his ayin, his shivim. That Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of his life, lo chahata eno, he was able to get back to that level of the 70. He was able to get back to the Shar Nun, the 50th gate, which corresponds to the 70 to the sword. So as we're saying, the 70, especially after the Chet of the Egel, is this level that Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't allowed to be on after the Chet, because after the Chet, Moshe Rabbeinu tries to get back to that level. He tries to say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, show me yourself, reveal yourself, I want to really see you. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, Ki lo yareni ha'adam v'chai. If you're going to see me, you're going to die. You can't see me panim el panim, even though earlier on by Matan Torah, we have this language of panim el panim. So it sounds like maybe that originally there was this ability to see a little bit more. We spoke in the past that Rabbi Akiva maybe was able to see a little bit more, even in his lifetime. But after the Chet HaEgel, it was no longer available. When Hashem said, Lech Red, the generation is not on that level. If the generation is not on that level, then Moshe Rabbeinu, you can't be on that level either. And if you try to be on that level, you're not going to make it. You're going to die. Okay, so based on that, says this Rav Pinto, maybe now we can understand the Midrash that says that Nadav and Avihu, they did the Avodah Shetuyee Yayin. They did the Avodah drunk on wine. He's saying, don't learn Shetuyee Yayin as literally they were drunk, but learn it as we were saying from our Shlach Kadoshes, from our Megala Mukotz, Heviani al Beit Yayin, bring us Hashem into your banquet hall of wine, meaning they wanted to get to that level of the Yayin. They wanted to get to that level of the 70. And we said after the Chet HaEgel, you can't do it anymore. You're only allowed the Mem Tet Panim, you're only allowed the 49 ways of learning, you can't get to the 50th gate, you're not allowed to get to that, you can't get that last facet that's going to get yourself in. But says now this Rabbi Pinto, he says, okay, so they couldn't get themselves in. Why? Because of the Chet HaEgel. And not because of the Chet HaEgel, you're no longer supposed to reach the level of the 50, you're no longer supposed to reach the level of the sword of the 70 facets, but rather, and if you would you would die. But he says that once the Egel was fixed, and when was the Egel fixed? This we also spoke about, that the Chet HaEgel had a certain tikkun on this inauguration day, with Aharon bringing all the korbanot, the Jewish people bringing all the korbanot, with those hidden Egels and pars that they're bringing as part of the tikkun. There was a tikkun for the Chet HaEgel right now, and that's why when they go in, they said, okay, now we can get close to God again. And when they die, what does it say every time they die? It says that they died close to God. Bekor v'atam lifnei Hashem. When they get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, meaning Nadav and Avihu wanted to be close to Hashem, and now that the tikkun of the Chet took place because of the Mishkan was inaugurated, they have that ability again. But says this video on Moshe, it's true they have that ability again, but they had that ability in a world that if you do get that close, you can't live. Ki lo yareni hadam v'chai. If you get to that level of the Shetuyee Yayin, you get to the level of the Yayin, the 70, the sword, you can do it again because we fixed the Egel, but you could only do it if your body and your soul depart at the exact same time. And that's what took place with Nadav and Avihu. They went in Shetuyee Yayin, meaning they were saying we want to get close to God again. We have that ability, even though it's going to come at a cost. Shabbat Shalom.